The loud crash silenced the chatter in the bar. Everyone at my table paused, glancing toward the commotion, as a man's voice rang out, pleading, "Honey, it's not what you think. Please, it's all a misunderstanding." His words fell on deaf ears. Moments later, there was a sharp grunt, followed by the thud of a body hitting the floor. A woman's voice rose above the murmurs, seething, "You a-hole. If you ever try to call me again, you'll be dealing with my father's shotgun. This is the last time I speak to you." A flurry of motion followed as the bar door swung open, and a petite figure stormed out into the night. Back at the scene, another woman helped the man up, only to slap him hard enough to send him stumbling into a chair. "Jerk," she spat before turning on her heel and heading toward the exit herself. I turned back to my beer, uninterested in the drama, but Michael leaned forward, addressing our group of coworkers gathered for Friday night drinks. "Why do they do that?" he asked, his tone more curious than judgmental. I kept quiet, but Helen, sitting across from him, raised an eyebrow. "Do what?" she asked, intrigued. Michael snorted. "Why is it whenever a man or woman is caught cheating, they always start by saying, 'It's not what you think'? How do they know what their partner is thinking?" I sighed and tried to turn away. The comments had brought back memories of the last time I had seen my wife Janelle, and I had to wonder what might have occurred in the 15 months since I walked out on her, with her shouting that very same phrase. "Ryan? Hey, Earth to Ryan," Holly said as she pinched me to get my attention. I turned back to find that everyone at the table had turned back to look at me. "What?" I asked, as I fiddled with my beer. "You spaced out there, Ryan," Ethan said. "What were you thinking about?" I looked at the faces of my collected coworkers and sighed. I knew them well, and they were not going to be satisfied with just half an answer, so I took a deep breath and started. "I just was thinking of a time in my past when I heard a woman say that phrase to me," I admitted. The table grew quiet around me. I had transferred into the East Regional Marketing Division about 15 months ago, and Helen and Michael certainly remembered the disdainful and antisocial mood I arrived in. You could almost see Helen make the connections, and she whispered, "So, you married a 304, I said with a growl. And yes, I did hear her try to use that line on me. Holly looked up, sadness in her eyes. I was trying to figure out why when she said, "But you did talk to her, didn't you?" I snorted. Maybe if I'd had some warning. Perhaps if her starting to stay out late had made me suspicious, or a night out with the girls, which got me to thinking and putting an investigator on it. But no, I got to find out the worst way. Coming home to our apartment early from work because of a migraine and finding a trail of discarded clothing leading into the bedroom. Yeah, I really wanted to find out how it could not be what I thought when I found Janelle wearing only a garter belt and stockings as some guy put his tongue to her clit. I could see Ethan wince. That must have been painful, but certainly, you've talked to her since then. I laughed bitterly. When? I walked out with her still crying out about it not being what I thought. The next day I snuck in to pick up some clothing and personal items and drove out here. Vigo had been after me for months to accept the transfer, and I accepted as long as I could transfer immediately. Michael just slapped me on the back. "Well, how about you get your revenge tonight?" He blurted out. "Everyone knows you are such a hermit. Live a little." I shrugged. "Look, I love looking at ladies, and I do know a couple of ladies I can meet when I want a quiet evening at a show and don't want to go alone, but right now dating isn't for me. I had always thought marriage was for life," I muttered. "So?" Ethan said with a nasty smile. "Are you claiming that it stopped working?" I tried to shake my head, but Holly immediately smiled and grabbed my hands to drag me onto the dance floor. I tried to get away, but a slow dance started and she melted into my arms. I fought the urge to put my hands on her hips, but they wrapped around her. The song ended and I released Holly, thinking that I could sneak out, but she put her arms around my neck and pulled me in for a kiss. "Drive me home?" she asked with her baby blue eyes looking directly into mine. I tried to look away, but no man I know could have refused Holly at that moment, and after a long fight with my libido, I nodded without speaking. She jumped up with a cheer and ran back to the table to grab her purse. I thought about trying to duck into the crowd, but Holly dashed back and put her arms around mine. I just looked back for a moment and saw Michael shrug. "Why me?" I grumbled as we fought our way to the exit. "Besides, what about your car?" Holly laughed. "I always get Helen to carpool with me on nights we are going to be at the bar. She drives me to work, and I drive us back to her place and walk home. But she likes to go to the parking lot a few times every night, and I end up staying out late." I stumbled in the parking lot. "Wait, Helen? Happily married Helen? Screws at least 2 different guys every time we have a bar night," Holly said serenely. "But don't worry, I haven't taken any lessons from her." I paused just by my car and looked at Holly. She joined the company less than a year ago after graduating with a degree in finance and accounting and already has won a promotion to senior accountant. If you only talked to her on the phone, you would say it was not a surprise, but Holly looks like a blonde beach bunny from California. I know Michael is still wondering where her brains come from. Holly admits that she was a cheerleader throughout high school and college and has received several modeling offers. She always has an expression of distaste when she describes the latest offer during one of the nights out. At work, Holly is the model of efficiency and dependability. She refuses to wear pantsuits, but always has a professional skirt and jacket and keeps her long hair tied back. The beauty still shines through, and every man in the office and more than a few of the women had tried to get her out for private dates only to be turned down. Holly shocked every one of the bar-goers one night by admitting that she was a virgin and had no interest in casual sex, preferring to wait for the right person. Now, I had not asked her out in the past. We did have some pleasant conversations when I had a question about the marketing department budget, and Holly was assigned to guide me through the audit, but otherwise, I was still too bitter about discovering Janelle to think about the possibility. Holly is 10 years younger than me and well out of my league. With her beauty and charm, she belongs on the arm of a CEO, not a broken-down bum of a marketing director. I have to admit that when the bitterness had cleared, Holly often played a prominent role in my fantasies, but I had always felt that asking her to be more than a friend was wrong. Well, my shock might have caused me to pause, but I remembered why I was in the lot and opened the door for Holly, holding it and averting my eyes as she slipped into the seat. She gave a surprisingly girlish giggle as she pulled her legs into my sedan and then pulled the door closed so I could walk around to my side, where I discovered she had reached across and opened the driver's door for me. As I climbed in, I could see the smile on her face. "Despite it all, you are a gentleman," she said as she removed her jacket and undid the first 2 buttons on her blouse, granting me a tantalizing glimpse of her bra. I tried once again to avert my eyes and concentrated on starting the car and pulling out of the lot. "It's ingrained now. Besides, a lady like you should be treated like the treasure you are," I murmured. Holly smiled again. "I'm sorry, Ryan, that I told you about Helen. You won't let her know that I gave her away, please?" I snorted. Other than the fact that Helen keeps bragging about how great Dean, her husband, is in bed while at the table, I really have no opinion. She's not my wife, and I don't know Dean personally. I just hope she realizes what she could lose. Holly looked somber. "So you're divorced then?" she asked me. "And have to pay lawyers and meet with the 304 again?" I barked. "Nope. Figured that I'd just ride off into the sunset and disappear. I'm afraid that marriage is an institution that I don't think I'll join in again." Holly looked sad for a moment, but then started talking about the upcoming company summer party. She had graduated in December, and this was going to be her first party. She was looking forward to the activities and wanted me to join her for the couples races, which were normally populated by husband and wife teams. She was rather insistent, and by the time I pulled my car up to her apartment complex, I found that I had agreed to attempt the 3-legged race with her. Holly waited in her seat as I walked around to open the door for her. As she stood up, she put her arms around me and gave me another kiss. "Do you want to come up?" she asked me. "Holly," I barked. "I thought you wanted someone special." "I'm not who you want." I expected that to get through to her, but Holly merely laughed. "You have no idea what I want," she told me. She let one of her arms fall to her side for a moment and then wiggled her hips. A moment later, I heard the soft shush as Holly's skirt slid down her legs. "Holly," I whispered urgently. "What are you doing?" There was a giggle, and then Holly forced my head down so I could see the lacy white panties she was wearing. "I'm seducing the man I want as my husband," she told me matter-of-factly. "Husband?" I asked. "But I just told you that I'm still married. I never tried to divorce Janelle. Besides, aren't you being just a bit hasty? We barely know each other." Holly just smirked as she tried to pull one of my hands. "Ryan, I've talked to most of the ladies in the office, and they all say wonderful things about you. We might not have the advantage of being longtime friends, but I've seen that your values and mine are the same. As for you being married, that can be fixed," she said with a smile as I pulled my hand free of hers and retreated around the door. Holly laughed and bent down to pull her skirt back up. I was trying to come up with a response to this sudden assault when she looked up at me with twinkling eyes. "You want this more than I do," she said knowingly, "and I'll get you to admit it and beg me for it." I just shook my head and stared as Holly refastened the skirt and stood there. "I never cheat, lie, love a woman that loves you. You are a wonderful man, Ryan. Caring, considerate, good at your job, and loyal. You are a prize worth winning, and I'm going to have you." I groaned and shook my head. "Not after what happened. Never again was my vow." Holly just laughed as she pushed the passenger door closed. "And it will never happen again." You think I saved myself for fun? I know what I look like, and I could have had men around the block all through high school and college. But then my husband probably would have been as loyal as Benedict Arnold. I need a man who will be in my arms every night and who never wants another. Of all the men I've met, you are the first like that who also got my heart racing. I will have you and only you. I could take no more, but dashed around my car and jumped in, locking the door and thanking my luck that the passenger door was locked. I expected Holly to bang on the windows, but she merely headed into her apartment as her laughter rang in my ears. I drove home and after taking in a stiff shot of whiskey tried to fall asleep. My slumbers were spoiled by nightmares of me and Holly, where instead of retreating I grabbed her and bent her over the hood of my car and took her, only backing off as other faceless men stepped up to join in the fun. Worse was a scene of us dancing at the club where she dragged me into the small hall adjoining the bathrooms and proceeded to pull a train as a phantom of Janelle pinned me to the wall and whispered, "It's not what you think." I have heard of waking up feeling exhausted, but this was the first time I could remember experiencing it. It was my first migraine since I had taken the job here, and I lay in bed until almost 2 before the headache receded enough that I was able to stand and consider enjoying the remainder of the weekend. Being mid-August, there was no football to watch, so I resorted to spending the afternoon on a leisurely hike in one of the local parks. Sunday, my headache was pretty much gone, so I headed out to do some long-neglected shopping errands. I was still thinking hard on Holly's surprising play for a relationship with me she sprung on Friday. The possibility puzzled me, and I was trying to decide what I should do about it, when I realized that the car behind me had followed me for my last 3 stops. My curiosity was aroused, but I decided that I needed more information. My final stop was going to be the grocery store to stock up on meals for the week, and I carefully watched to see where the car parked once I was in the lot of the local supermarket. The driver obviously knew that there was a chance I could catch him, as he parked some distance away, but where he would have a clear view of my car and any route I might take to approach him. I looked at him from a distance and only saw a rather aged old man, sitting in a beaten-down sedan with peeling paint. If it had not been for the previous stops, I would never have noticed him at all. But it was clear by where he was parked that any attempt to approach him would result in him driving away, so I entered the store to complete my shopping and then returned home. The sedan turned off a block short of the apartment complex where I was renting a place, and I guessed that he both knew where I lived or was just playing around and had a real call to run off to. On Monday, both Michael and Ethan approached me privately to apologize for making me speak on Friday. I shrugged and continued my work, concentrating on reviewing the marketing and sales performance numbers for the last quarter. The company had rolled out some new products in March, and we finally were seeing the marketing campaigns get some traction on attracting new customers, so I needed to see what campaigns appeared to be working. Helen stopped by just before lunch and seemed more than a bit worried. She pushed the door to my office closed and then sat in my chair. Her nervousness continued for several moments as she sat quietly fidgeting. I was about to ask her what it was about when sobbed for a moment. "I know that Holly told you about my playing in the parking lot. Can I ask what you did think?" she said, refusing to meet my eyes. I sighed. "Helen, you can't use my memories of a broken marriage from over a year ago to prepare for the moment Dean discovers that you are some parking lot groupies. I have no clue what he would think. I barely considered what I thought when I walked in on the scene, which caused me to leave Janelle." She seemed puzzled. "What do you mean? Surely you must have thought of something." I looked at her. "It's hard to think when you discover your wife screwing another man. And don't ever call me Shirley." Confusion colored Helen's face. "But I have to know. I love Dean. He really is the best I've ever been with. But I can't stop." I just sat there silent and Helen lowered her head. A number of nasty comments popped into my head, but I refused to use them and waited for Helen to look at me. When she finally did, I shrugged. "Helen, in the end, it's going to be about how Dean feels. Not how I might feel or how you talk about it. It's about Dean's feelings when he discovers that you have not taken the forsaking all others part of your wedding vows seriously. That is all I can tell you." Helen stood up with a frown, clearly deep in thought. She proceeded to walk to my door and opened it to let herself out. I could see Holly waiting outside and groaned at the two ladies past each other, and Holly closed the door behind her. I was about to get up when Holly sprinted over and dropped into my lap, trapping me in the chair while putting her arms around me for a kiss. "Holly," I growled. "What do you think you are doing?" She giggled. "I'm giving my fiancé a kiss, and then we will go over the monthly budget figures." I looked her directly in the eyes and was surprised when she neither looked away nor appeared ashamed. Instead, she looked directly at me and I sighed. "I already told you. I'm still married, and I won't get involved with you. You deserve better." Holly just laughed. "You'd get a divorce if I told you to," she said. Your voice is saying no, but I can feel another part saying something different. I grumbled. Holly, you are coming at this with all the finesse of a football linebacker. Where are the little hints, the teasing and such? If you didn't have me trapped in the chair, I'd be out the door already. Holly laughed louder. You say you don't want it, but I notice you aren't saying no. Could it be that you do want to marry me? I sighed and gently pushed her off my lap. She already knew what I wanted to hide, and that was just how attracted to her I was. I was feeling flattered and shocked that this jewel beyond measure was interested, and she was making it clear beyond any doubt that she wanted me. Still, the memory of Janelle and her final words to me haunted me enough that I forced my mind back to the budget and remained professional for the rest of her time in my office. Holly left with another giggle, pulling her skirt up to show the tops of her stockings before she left the room. The look she threw over her shoulder made it clear she wanted me to jump up and rush after her, but I held on to my desk with whitening knuckles until she lowered the skirt and opened the door. I was spending my afternoon on more progress reports and reviews. The company had a major quarterly business meeting in a week, and I had a number of reports due to Lawrence Fellows, the VP of Marketing, by Thursday. Many just required updating the graphs and charts, but I preferred to review the data before we started the updates, so we could anticipate any problems. The work was mostly tedious. I did have to do some extra work to add notes for the new products and their progress in gaining market share. Many of the new products were doing as expected, but one, aimed at teenage boys, was not doing well, and some market research had revealed that the product was being presented incorrectly. A new plan had been developed, but adding in the graphic details was tricky, and I wanted to be sure that Lawrence was happy with the presentation when he received it. I had cleared my calendar in order to get this completed, but my secretary Sally interrupted me at 4:30. I'm sorry here, but a Detective Smith from the police department is here. He says he needs to see you. I tried to think of what crime I might have committed recently, but could not come up with any. Finally, I realized that the only way I would get an answer was to speak to the officer. Send him in. A moment later, a large man in standard business wear walked in as I stood from my chair. He could see my initial reaction, so he pulled a billfold out of his wallet and showed me the badge and service card contained within. Sorry, as a detective I usually work in plainclothes, he said as I looked over the card. But this should be a simple stop. You are Ryan Bennett, and 2 years ago you lived in Maple Grove, California, correct? I started as I handed the badge back to the officer. Why would you need to know that? I asked. The detective laughed. I guess you aren't aware that there is a missing person report back in Maple Grove for you. Says that 15 months ago you walked out of your apartment one Thursday and never returned. I gave a bitter laugh. I returned the next day to collect my clothing and personal items. Then I never returned. The detective looked at me. So, you are the Ryan Bennett reported as missing? I can't be missing, I said with an edge to my voice. I'm obviously right here in my office. The officer looked at the desk, with its prominently displayed nameplate. He looked around the place and could see the few pictures and plants I had brought in over my time to make it feel less like a prison. Of course, the largest prison was in my mind and contained all the memories of the 7 years I had lived with Janelle before discovering her in bed with another man. But I was not going to mention that to the detective. He seemed to notice the pictures and even took a moment to look at several more closely. The 3 main ones were an interesting review of my life. One was a simple photo taken at my high school graduation. The second was from when I graduated from college and contained all of the members of the intramural softball team I played on my last year. The last was from the previous summer and showed me holding up a largemouth bass that I had caught on a trip to the lakes with Ethan. None of the pictures contained any women. I think I see, he said as he turned back to me. Well, I still must report that you have been found, and it will get back to Maple Grove. It's possible someone will come looking for you, but I can see no signs of duress or coercion. I gave another bitter laugh. No, I came out here to find myself, and I guess I did. I'm right here. The detective gave me a look before joining in the laughter. He offered me his hand and left quietly, closing the door behind him. I looked over and found that the detective's visit had taken the clock up to nearly 5 p.m. With the workday winding to a close, I quickly reviewed my notes before firing off half a dozen emails to various analysts and marketing managers asking for their final inputs on the quarterly report. Then, I got up and headed out to my car, passing the now empty desk of Sally on my way. The parking lot was already rather deserted as most of the employees liked to arrive early and leave before 4 to avoid the evening traffic. I had actually arrived before most of them, but as a director I felt that putting in a few extra hours was important and was almost always one of the last to leave. The lot was still brightly lit, and one of the things I could see someone with long blonde hair sitting on the hood of my car. I groaned silently because sure enough it was Holly and she came strutting up to me, stopping just in front of me. You ready to surrender yet? She asked with a grin. Never. I cried as I tried to duck around her and get to my car. Holly laughed and gave chase, finally pinning me against the car door as I reached to open it. You'll give in eventually, she said in my ear. I managed to lean back enough to open the door and then turn to look at Holly, which proved to be a mistake. Her jacket and blouse were completely unbuttoned. Holly, how can you be like that in a parking lot? Someone might see you. She giggled. The right someone is seeing me, she said, although her hands did move to start buttoning up her blouse. I shook my head. I have a hard time believing that you are a virgin. You're way too practiced at seduction. The giggle turned into full laughter. What? You think that just because I'm a virgin I haven't watched my roommates and friends make men dance to their tunes? I was a cheerleader. I went to many slumber parties where the girls would brag about the men they seduced and how easy it was to trip them up and get them into bed. I might not have much practice, but I sure remember my theory. I found myself laughing, but then I stopped to look seriously at Holly. That doesn't change some things. I'm still married. Holly's response was to once again put her arms around me, although I noticed that she threw something onto my car seat before she pulled me in for a kiss. I'm sure you are seriously thinking of changing that state. For me, she whispered as we broke off the kiss. Before I could respond, she was skipping across the courtyard, only stopping to briefly wave before she got in her car and drove off. I had remained standing, partly because watching Holly walk away was a true joy, but partly out of shock. Since I had walked in on Janelle, I had been able to maintain a distance from women. I have taken more than my share of cold showers, but not one woman had gotten more than a glance from me. But now I had to admit that Holly was right. I was thinking of going back to Maple Grove and filing for divorce, something I had never considered before. The package that Holly had thrown on the car seat proved to contain a bra and panties, and something told me that it was the pair she had worn to work that day. I blushed a little as I held the lacy lingerie and wondered if her skin under them was as flawless as the skin on her arms and face. The idea surprised me, and again I realized that I was far closer to surrendering than I imagined. The night ended up passing quietly. I was working on some painting as relaxation and using that activity to avoid thinking about Holly when the phone rang. I answered, but the party at the other end dropped the line, leaving me wondering what the story was. They did not call again, and by the time I fell into bed, I had nearly forgotten that the caller ID identified an area code that included Maple Grove. The next day at work proved to be far more hectic than I predicted. Lawrence, the VP, had received my preliminary presentation, and the poor showing of the one product immediately generated a phone call from him. We spent more than 2 hours reviewing the data and projections, and I detailed the new path forward suggested by several of the marketing managers. He was a bit unhappy about the failure of the original plan, as his son had played a significant role in its development, but accepted blame for the poor rollout and asked me to initiate the changes in marketing immediately. Of course, that meant additional meetings and phone calls, as the marketing campaign needed to be kicked off and budgets needed approval. I wound up so busy that when Holly stopped by to ask me if I wanted to go to lunch, I was barely able to pull the telephone away from my mouth and shake my head. Her response was to smile and drop an envelope on my desk. That envelope, which I managed to open at the end of the day, contained a picture of Holly in a bikini from the one modeling job she had ever performed, back when her university decided to have a cheerleader calendar, and a note which read, "See the rest. My place. Friday at 11:30. I felt myself blushing more than a little and started to work out excuses for not being in town on Friday as I walked to my car. I was struggling hard with how to let Holly down gently that I was halfway home before I realized that I had a car following me closely. A glance in the mirror revealed a small GM-built sedan, but the evening light made it impossible to tell who was driving. I might have tried to lose the driver, but after the long day at work, I was looking forward to dinner, so I continued home and studiously ignored the car, which shadowed my every move. The car turned off just before I reached the apartment, and I shrugged as I climbed the steps to my home and let myself inside. I was confused by all the recent activity, but remembered the steak I had thawing in the refrigerator and set up my indoor electric grill to cook the steak. I know, it's not as good as an open-fire charcoal grill, but somehow, I suspect my manager would not accept me using one of those inside the apartment. The grill was just about the right temperature for me to throw the steak on, and the marinade had soaked the steak perfectly when I heard a knock on the door. I shouted for the knocker to wait and jumped to the door. When I opened it, I was speechless because standing there was Janelle, my wife and the hooker who had driven me more than 2,000 miles away. She seemed very unsure, but as the silence extended, she blushed and then looked at me. "It's not what you think," she whispered. That brought me back to life. "You don't know what I think," I growled and stepped away, returning to the kitchen to get the steak on the grill. I left the door open, and a moment later Janelle stepped inside and closed it behind her. No, Ryan, she pleaded. It really was not what you think. I never meant to hurt you. This time I gave a bitter laugh. And you spreading your legs for some jackass in our marital bed is supposed to heal me how? I need to hear the feminine logic behind this, just so I remember it for next time before I kick a girl out. Ryan, Janelle whined. I want to get back with you. I've spent months searching for you. Really? I said dubiously. And yet you never thought to call Vigo and ask if I had obtained a transfer? He would have told you. I remember him warning me that if you did call, he would tell you the truth. Obviously, that wasn't something you did. Janelle whined more. I did call, but all HR would say was that you didn't work at that site anymore. And I have been looking, but money was tight, so I couldn't afford a major search. Again, I barked out some laughter. This is the internet age. A name and $100, and you can find just about everything about a person. Current and former addresses, spouse and children's names, even employers. Why not just use the internet? I didn't know how. Janelle wailed. I didn't know what to do. You stormed out that day I was with Steve and vanished. Steve kept pressuring me for more time. I had to quit my job because Steve wouldn't stop, and then I couldn't find you. So, Steve was a coworker, I growled. Why did you quit? When I saw you, it looked like you were about to enjoy the experience. Janelle blushed. He told me that if I didn't, he'd fire me, she wailed. And he never did screw me. You walked in, and he panicked and left just minutes after you vanished. The next day I was at work to tell HR all about the situation, but by the time I got home all your stuff was gone. This time I snorted in disbelief. And you received no settlement from your boss? I've heard most companies pay well to avoid a sexual harassment lawsuit. If you did that, there should have been plenty of money. Janelle just shook her head. They decided to fight it. It was 12 months before the court ruled in my favor, and then 2 more before I finally got paid. As soon as I had the money, I used it to find you. Guess it's time I got lost again, I muttered, causing Janelle to collapse in sobs as I flipped my steak over to sear the other side. I watched her on my couch, but refused to take a step in her direction as my dinner continued to cook. She seemed to be repeating a whispered phrase over and over, and finally looked up at me. It's not what you think, she said again, tears pouring down her face. You keep repeating that, I said, but you missed the important part. I don't care what it was. I remember 3 words in our wedding vows, forsaking all others I believe they were. When that Steve got you in bed with your panties off, you definitely weren't keeping that vow. Now how can I believe that you meant any of your vows? How can I trust you? If you say you are working late, will it mean real work? Or that you are going to be bent over your boss's desk? Janelle was just shaking her head at me. No. I love you, Ryan. It meant nothing to me. I just forgot and let Steve pressure me. Again I scoffed. You only got upset when you opened your eyes and saw me looking at you. Janelle was crying into her hands again, and I realized that my steak was cooked just the way I like. So I pulled it from the grill and set it on a plate to cool while I scavenged up the fixings for a small salad. I looked over at Janelle crying on the couch and sighed. Janelle, I said, if you had come to me the first day Steve pressured you and told me the problem, perhaps I could believe you now. But I remember you talking about how nice Steve was, how sweet he was, how much you admired all his sports achievements. I think the only reason you now are complaining is that you got caught. That's why I won't listen to your pleas of, it's not what you think. I never thought, oh, I caught my wife cheating, or oh, look at Janelle naked on the bed. No, my thoughts were simpler. It was that you could never be honest with me. I remember warning you that I thought you had a bit of a crush on Steve, but you promised me that it was just friendship. No, with him it was more. With me it became just friendship. Janelle was shaking her head and again whispered, no, it wasn't like that. It was a mistake. He meant nothing to me. Well, now he can be experience for you. Something to warn any daughters you might have about how to kill a marriage in one simple step. I was going to just live my life here, quietly. But your return today reminded me of why I left. Janelle, tomorrow I'm going to file for divorce. It's over. Janelle just collapsed on the couch and started crying. I watched her for a while, but the sobs eventually stopped only for Janelle to emit the faint snore that signaled she had just fallen asleep. I sighed and covered her with a blanket before sitting at the dinner table and eating the now cold steak. After dinner I used my cell phone and made several calls from the bedroom for a lawyer. It took a while, but I did find one willing to meet with me in the morning and set a time to arrive shortly before 9. After that I read a book in bed before going to sleep, locking the bedroom door before I did so. I am not sure locking the door mattered. When I woke up and went to get breakfast, Janelle was still sleeping on my couch. I had left a message to my boss that I was going to be late to work due to personal business and called Lawrence to let him know what had come up. He was not entirely happy that I was not spending the morning dealing with the problems, but once he understood what I was going through, accepted my absence. I had finished breakfast when Janelle finally sat up from the couch and rubbed her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said. "Did I fall asleep?" I nodded and brought over a tray with juice, toast, and an omelette that was only a little cold. "Yes, and slept for over 12 hours, I answered. Janelle sighed. "I can't seem to sleep anymore. I need your arms around me, Ryan. I swear Steve didn't screw me." I glared at her. "Only because I happened to come home sick and catch you." Janelle frowned. "Please, give me another chance. It was a mistake." I shook my head. "Maybe, just maybe, we can try dating again in the future. But we've had 15 months apart, and I still find myself wanting to strangle you for what you did to our marriage that day. We need to divorce. After that, we can see if we can rebuild the trust we once had." Janelle looked very sad, but finally nodded. "Lynn said you would probably want that, and that if I wanted a real chance, I had to give it to you." It was my turn to be confused. Who is Lynn, and what did she mean? Janelle looked at me again, tears filling her eyes. "After I quit my job, I went to see Lynn. She works as a grief and marriage counselor. I told her all about what I had done and your reaction, as well as the fact that you had disappeared. She was supportive, but agreed with your view that I had failed the marriage by not being honest with you about Steve. When I told her that I wanted to find you and get the marriage back, she was positive that we'd have to divorce first and then see if we could rebuild it. Trust was going to be the biggest problem." I found myself nodding. "Too bad you didn't realize all this before Steve talked you into a bit of afternoon delight." Janelle just covered her face again. "Ryan, please, I'm hurting enough. Let's just get the divorce started so I can return to Maple Grove and pack up." "Pack up?" I asked. Janelle looked at me. "I can't date you if you're working here, and I live in Maple Grove. That's over 2,000 miles away. So I'll find a new place here and move." Janelle seemed cheerful and sad at the same time. I could tell that my adamant position on divorce saddened her, but somehow my failure to yell and scream actually buoyed her spirits, and after breakfast, we agreed to take our separate cars and drive to the lawyer's office. Jake Donovan was professional and efficient. Once we explained the details, he moved to have us fill out a number of forms. One I had to fill out indicated that I wanted no part of Janelle's final judgment for the harassment case. She also waived any back alimony based on the $600 a month I had continued to transfer into our joint account during the 15 months we were apart. Janelle blushed when the lawyer asked why she had not used that to track me and admitted she had not thought about that. Part of me wanted to believe that she had continued to see Steve, but she produced a copy of the final judgment for Jake, along with a detailed accounting of her finances since I had moved out, which clearly showed that she had both left and sued her former employer. My heart actually stopped when Jake pulled out a tape recorder and spoke to us. "Now, just to help expedite this, I'm going to record both of you affirming to the divorce with my secretary here. She will be notarizing a number of documents, and that should allow the court to make a summary judgment for divorce. This means that rather than the normal long wait, the divorce will be final in 30 days, but you are both accepting the financial split you agreed to today." We both nodded, and Jake called in his secretary. She sat by taking notes as first I, and after I had finished, Janelle attested to the truthfulness of all the forms we had signed and to our honest and sincere desire that we be granted a quick divorce. The only hiccup was when Jake asked Janelle, "Do you, Janelle Bennett, wish for this divorce?" There had been a long pause before Janelle spoke. "I wish with all my heart I had not hurt Ryan with my own foolishness and that we could remain together, but I have received honest and sincere advice that both he and I need this divorce before we can attempt to put our relationship back together. So I guess that in legal terms, yes, I wish for this divorce." Jake's secretary snorted as she heard this statement, but otherwise said nothing. The process took about 4 hours, and afterwards, Jake shook both our hands. "Mrs. Bennett, you mentioned moving, so I can either mail you copies of everything and we can hope the Postal Service forwards it properly, or you can pick them up here once you're settled in town." "Mr. Bennett, I'll send yours to your apartment." I nodded, and we left the office. Janelle seemed quiet and thoughtful as we did, and kept looking down. We were at our cars, and I was preparing to get in and drive to work when she looked up. "Thanks, Ryan." "For what?" I asked. I was trying to figure out why Janelle was thanking me for getting a divorce from her. "Because once again you have been honorable and caring. You could have closed the door on me, or simply demanded a divorce and not allowed me my say. I don't have many illusions anymore. Lynn warned me that I have little chance of winning you back, but at least I have a little hope," she said with a sad smile. I found myself nodding as I got into my car and drove away with Janelle standing there watching me. It had not been easy for me. Janelle seemed sincere and remorseful, and I could not deny that the 7 years of marriage had been wonderful. But the devil on my shoulder kept asking if I could trust her in the future, and prevented me from opening my heart up. Back at work, I found most everyone in a good mood. The quarterly report had gone out to Lawrence on time, and the updated marketing plan was quickly taking shape. This did mean that I was immediately needed for a series of meetings, as I had to sign off on many of the decisions and contracts. It's kept me busy for the remainder of the day and filled my schedule for the rest of the week. Holly did not get an opportunity to attempt another ambush, but she did sit in on several strategy and budget meetings where I could feel her speculative gaze on me. She tried to approach me on 2 occasions, but each time someone called for my attention on a detail of the new marketing plan, and she retreated quietly. I knew that her reticence would not last, and I was right, because as the Friday workday wound to a close, she knocked on the door to my office. "Ryan, there is a gang going to Charlie's again. Can you drive me?" I sighed and looked her in the eyes. She seemed a bit less confident than she had been the previous time she had entered my office, but the pleading looks in her eyes kept me from saying no. Of course, my agreement resulted in Holly giving me a close hug before dragging me from my office and into the elevator to the ground floor. I managed to keep her from giving me any more hugs or kisses, but found her hand in mine during the ride in the elevator. The professional part of me screamed to pull my hand away, but instead I gave Holly a loving squeeze before the doors opened and we walked out to the car. Once in the car and driving to the bar, Holly tried to grill me about my absence Wednesday, opening the conversation with a question. "So, you missed all of Wednesday morning, why?" I just smiled. It was personal business I needed to get resolved. "Nothing you need to worry about for now." Holly frowned, but then began dragging her skirt up her thighs, only stopping when the tops of her stockings were showing. "Should I leave this on for our night at my apartment?" She vamped. "Holly, are you trying to—" I growled. "Get you into my bed," she affirmed with a smile. "And I'm planning on you never wanting to leave it." I shook my head as we turned into the parking lot at Charlie's. "You are rushing things. You've known me only 7 months. Slow down and think about what you are doing." Holly giggled. "I'm getting the man I trust and respect most in the world into my bed. He will be my husband, my love, the father of my children, and my lord in all things sexual." I snorted, but refrained from saying more as I parked the car and we walked to the bar. The usual crowd from work had claimed a table, and I found a seat between Ethan and Michael, ignoring the smirk on Holly's face as she sat next to Helen and whispered something in her ear. We placed our orders for drinks, and I noticed that the bottle of beer Holly ordered was brought to her unopened, and she used a bottle opener she produced from her purse to pop the top. I was drinking a draft beer and listening in as Ethan and Michael argued over the upcoming pro football season. Ethan has always been a Cowboys fan and was sure that this year they would finally be able to return to the Super Bowl. I have never been a huge fan of the Cowboys, but joined in the conversation with an effort. Helen, Diane, and Holly started a discussion about fashion until the band started going, and then Diane and Holly jumped up saying they wanted to dance. I waved for them to enjoy themselves when Holly shoved her half-finished bottle of beer into my hands. "I won't be finishing this," she told me as Diane dragged her onto the dance floor. I just shrugged and turned back to the conversation, which was now all about the end of the Patriots dynasty, or at least Michael's hope that it was over. He had once lived in Boston and left the region with an undying hatred of the team for some reason. It was still a fun and exciting conversation, until a slow song broke out and Holly appeared to drag me onto the dance floor. We did not say a word, but Holly slid into my arms as if she belonged there, and held me tightly as we danced across the floor. I usually am a terrible dancer, but Holly seemed to anticipate my every turn and molded her body to follow my lead. It was such a joy to hold her that I felt a moment of shock when the song ended and the band switched to a faster tune. I begged off and returned to the table, only to see Michael and Ethan looking at me. "What's the deal?" Ethan asked. "What do you mean?" I asked. Michael pointed to Holly, who had remained on the dance floor and was back to dancing with Diane and Helen. "Holly never slow dances. Not in the 7 months she's worked with us. Now 2 weeks in a row she's dragged you onto the dance floor for some real close dancing." I shrugged. "I have no idea. I'm not looking for anything at the moment. Heck, legally I'm still married." Ethan looked a bit surprised at that. "You ever going to divorce her?" he asked. I paused, trying to think of a way to tell the truth without admitting that it was already in the works. I could see that happening. If we could avoid arguing over every last penny, I finally said, "I'd rather not enrich the lawyers of the world." Helen had returned to the table and heard my last sentence. "But don't you want to find a new woman and get married again?" she asked. I just looked at her. She seemed to realize what I was thinking because after a moment she averted her eyes. The silence extended and I sighed. Do you really want to hear my answer to that? Helen looked back at me and opened her mouth. Before she could speak, I held up my hand. Stop. I don't need to hear from you how you've decided to stop, or that it was all a mistake and you love your husband. The truth is that a good wife, an honest wife, would never have started. Ethan looked a bit upset by that, and I started to wonder if he had joined Helen for a few of her backseat adventures. Michael was a bachelor, but my comments must have made him impressed because he was lost in thought. The band finally ended their first set, thanking the bar patrons for listening and promising more slow songs after the break. Holly and Diane came back to the table and signaled the barmaid, who once again brought Holly an unopened bottle of beer. I held up the one she had been drinking earlier, which still had some beer in it. What about this one? I asked. Holly just smiled. I told you. I won't finish that one. Is it warm or something? I asked, receiving a wink and a smile in return. After this, the talk turned to the upcoming company picnic, which was in 2 more weeks. The older employees were looking forward to the afternoon in the park, and Holly and Diane were demanding tales of previous picnics. One thing I noticed was Ethan remained quiet when the stories turned to moments when married employees were caught sneaking off with partners other than their spouses. Although the tale of the time the wife of the VP of operations went for a walk with one of the female secretaries brought a smile to his face. The band started back up, and once again, Holly handed me an unfinished bottle of beer, saying that I should finish it off. I left it at the table as the guys now started joining in the dancing, guarding the table and watching the play on the floor. However, I quickly picked up on a pattern. Holly would dance during any fast number, although she would occasionally return to the table to rest. But if a slow number started, she would attempt to get me out on the dance floor. If she succeeded, we danced. The times I refused, or was already dancing with Diane, she sat down and waited for the song to end. This pattern continued until around 9:30, when I finally decided that it was time for me to head home. Sorry, folks, I said to Michael, Ethan, and Diane, who were planning on staying longer. But it's time I found a quieter place. It's getting a bit too crowded here for me. I picked up my jacket and found the waitress, giving her a sizable tip for putting up with Michael and Ethan, who had grown a bit drunk. I then turned to leave to find Holly standing next to me smiling. You're coming with me, she said. We walked outside the bar, and in the silence outside I smirked. And I'm letting you in my car. Holly laughed. Because I'm a defenseless little girl, and you'd feel bad if you didn't protect me and get me home safe. I had to laugh at that comment as we walked to the car, where I opened the passenger door to let Holly in. She smiled again, but this time kissed me on the cheek before sitting down. I could get so used to this, she sighed. I was shaking my head as I walked around the car and got in the driver's side. Holly, It was her turn to hold up a hand. Wait, let me guess. You were going to say you were too old, not handsome enough, not rich enough, not pure enough because of your previous marriage, and of course still married. I sat there quietly as I started my car, trying to think of a retort. Finally I growled out, You forgot not a good dancer. Holly burst out laughing, unbuckling her seatbelt long enough to kiss me on the cheek. Oh, you still want to fight? She mused. I wish there wasn't a fight at all, I whined. And your points weren't wrong. I'm all of those things. Holly again just smiled. You are only 8 years older than me. That's not bad. I already told you that I didn't want a man who might cheat, so I don't need a Brad Pitt, and you aren't exactly bad looking, you know. It's the same thing for rich. Money is nice, but I want a man who understands that the best riches are the happiness that contentment with life brings. As for your marriage, someday you'll get a divorce, and this way I know you'll have some idea of how to light my fire in bed. I just sighed. Holly once again. You are a jewel beyond measure and worthy of a far better man than I said, falling silent for the drive to her apartment. We arrived there and Holly sat quietly smiling at me once I found a parking spot. I waited several moments and then realized that she was going to wait until I opened her door, so got out with a sigh and started to walk around the car. I was halfway around the car when I heard my driver's side door close and Holly burst out of the passenger side, holding the keys I had left in the ignition. Holly, I shouted. She dropped the keys down her blouse and then ran off towards her apartment with a giggle. I paused long enough to close the passenger door and then gave chase. But her athletic body easily outran mine and I arrived to find her apartment door open to darkness. I should have turned and called a cab. At least that was my thought later. But instead I stepped inside looking for Holly. I had reached the hallway and was gazing down it when I heard the front door close and turned to find Holly standing in front of it, wearing only her lingerie. I figured you might like a bit of a fashion show, she vamped as she walked up to me and put her arms around my neck. I've heard that most men get turned on by seeing their girl in silk and lace. Turned on was an understatement. I was fighting with my lust, trying desperately not to grab and take this beautiful woman who kept throwing herself at me. I had tried every possible argument, and deep inside part of me was ready to wave the right flag. But I'm married, I finally croaked out, throwing down a protest even I recognized as feeble. I won't cheat. I could feel Holly's arms tighten around me. So you get a divorce. Then you won't longer be married. It should only take a few months. My mind and mouth betrayed me as I figured the schedule and croaked out. It will be final in 28 days. Holly's arms dropped and she stepped back. What? Ryan Bennett, what did you just say? I sighed and fought my body, which lamented the disappearance of Holly's arms. It took several deep breaths to return some strength to my legs and slow my beating heart, during which Holly stared at me. Finally, I felt ready to speak. I said that my divorce will be final in 28 days. Holly squealed in surprise and delight and dashed forward, forcing me against the wall before showering me with kisses. How? When? Was it for me? She asked between kisses. I used my arms to push her away so I could look into her eyes. That proved to be a huge mistake, as her baby blues were filled with hope and tears. Janelle found me. She turned up Tuesday night and wanted to talk. Sometime in the past, she had talked to a counselor who recommended that we divorce, although she claims she's going to try to win me back. Wednesday morning, we saw a lawyer who knew about a special divorce petition for couples with no children. Since we agree to the financial terms, the divorce only takes 30 days to grant. Holly's eyes widened during my speech, and at the end, she seemed to be counting on her fingers. So, we can get married in mid-September. She screamed joyfully and wrapped me up for another kiss. Holly, I said as I pushed her away again. Who do you think I am? She took her clothes off and walked towards him. You are my fiancé, and after tonight, you are going to be my lover. No, that I will not do, I stated. I don't care if the paperwork is in, or if Janelle had her fun long ago. I will not violate my marriage vows until they are officially dissolved. I started to walk to the door, thinking about calling that cab, when Holly grabbed my arm with a cry. No, please. I'm sorry, she said. I turned to look at her, and there were tears flowing from her eyes. She started, but then paused. I began to think she was not going to say more when she sighed. I tried to rush you, she whispered. I know that once you are officially free, a whole bunch of women at work and at the bar are going to make a play, and I wanted you wrapped up first. I glared at Holly for a moment and wrested my arm from her grip before stalking over to the couch and sitting down. Holly watched me go and then pulled her panties back up before taking a seat in the battered, easy chair in her apartment. Holly, I sighed as she sat down. I still don't understand this. Why do you have this obsession with me? I'm just a man. She looked down for a moment and started to cry. You are not just a man. You are an even better man than my father was. I had been prepared for many arguments, but not this one. Your father? I asked. Holly sighed. I guess I need to tell you. I grew up in Nebraska, in a small town where my father worked as a mechanic for many of the local farmers. He was respected and well-liked by almost all, and devoted to his children. Children? I asked. Holly smiled. Yes, I have 6 siblings, 3 older brothers, 1 older sister, 1 younger sister, and little Billy, the youngest brother, will be a junior in college come September. So many, I whispered. Holly laughed. Father loved us, and Mother never complained. But that was the problem. Mother was one of these small-town girls that dreamed of the big city. She did take care of us, but most of her time was spent exercising to keep her body fit and making sure she had the latest hairstyles and fashion. It was sad, really. I look back now, and by the time I was 6, she was missing out on most of her children's lives because she fought so hard to be something she wasn't. I was shaking my head, unable to picture the life Holly had led, but she shrugged and continued. It all came apart just before I started high school. My father had received a call to attend to a broken tractor at a farm near our house, and after the repair was complete, stopped by the home to find Mother in bed with some flashy lawyer out of Dallas. We never knew how she met him, but my father was served for divorce the next day, and my nice family life was ruined. Nice woman, your mother, I said sarcastically. I expected Holly to get upset, but she just shook her head. You have no idea. Father was totally devoted to her and to his family. All through the divorce, he refused to say anything bad and stated he would take her back if she would devote herself to the family. She not only refused, but abandoned her children in the divorce settlement, leaving us with Father so she could rush off to Dallas and marry her flash lawyer. I winced. You father couldn't have taken that well, I said. Holly was crying now. It destroyed him. He soldiered on for 7 years, making sure that all his children graduated high school, and he saved all the money he could to help pay for college or trade school for each of us. The summer after Billy graduated from high school, he hung himself in the bedroom where he and Mother used to sleep. It was the first time in 7 years he had set foot in it. "My God," I said. "That's—" Holly just nodded. "I know, but all this changed me. Throughout high school I was fighting to keep my father sane, and watching my friends jump from bed to bed and relationship to relationship without a care. I became the shoulder of choice to cry on for many of my friends, and I started to despise the idea of casual sex. Then in college, 3 girls in my freshman dorm basically screwed their way out of school when they spent so much time with guys that their studies suffered. After that, I thought about my father and realized that I could not do to any man what my mother did to him, but I didn't want to suffer as he had. I needed to find just the right man." "I'm not him," I protested. "You barely know me, and besides I've been married." "I know a lot about you," she whispered. "All that the women in the office do is gossip about the men, and you have so many rumors swirling about you. Most of them barely scratch the surface, but one thing is sure, you can be the one-woman man that I need." I closed my eyes and sighed. Every time I thought I might get an opening to end this relationship, Holly found a new angle and I was getting dragged deeper. Finally, I stood up. "I need to sleep on this, Holly. It's too much, too fast, and I can't say I love you." Holly put her arms around me and started pulling me to her bedroom. "Then you can sleep in my bed and tell me in the morning." "Holly," I just said. I protested again. "I'm not offering you too much. Yes, I'm going fast, but I want a lifetime with you and wish that it had started 8 months ago. And can you say that you don't like the idea of being with me?" I looked down at Holly as she stood there in her panties, garter belt, and stockings, and smiled at me. Sometime at the bar, she had put her hair in a cheerleader's ponytail and openly revealed there was no nicer body I had ever seen so close. Years of cheerleading and dance had left her with a flat stomach, yet womanly curves, and Holly was exploiting all that to perfection. I decided to risk it all and gathered her in my arms, initiating a loving French kiss. Holly seemed about to fight it off and then melted into my arms, kissing me back until we had to break for air. "What?" she asked. "Holly, I lust after you. The idea of being with you definitely haunts my dreams, but I don't want lust. I want love. I want that connection I thought I had with Janelle." She just smiled and grabbed my hand again. "Then tonight, I promise to leave my remaining clothing on, but you sleep in my bed with me." I wanted to protest, but she would not be denied and dragged me to the bedroom where she ordered me to strip down to my underwear before climbing into bed. I lay down in the bed first and rolled onto my side. Part of me feared what was to come, but Holly merely waited to see which side I wished to sleep on and then snuggled into my arms on the same side, spooning up against me in a comfortable manner before slipping off to sleep. I struggled a bit to fall asleep, but managed to drift off to slumber, acutely aware of the nubile beauty in my arms. The next morning, I woke to find Holly still lying in my arms. Her baby blues bore into me, and I could almost feel the last shackle holding my heart closed snap. I put my arms around her and just held her close for a moment. "Holly, you win," I whispered. "I surrender. Will you marry me?" Holly gasped and then started crying. I wanted to relax my arms and look at her, but she held onto me like a life preserver and cried, relaxing only after the tears stopped. I was still puzzling out the reason for the tears when she put her tear-covered lips to mine and gave me a kiss. "Yes," she said when we finally broke apart. I laughed because she said no more, but then my stomach grumbled, reminding me that I had little to eat the day before. So I stood up to look for my clothes. Holly just lay on the bed smiling. "So, when do we move in together?" she asked as I found my keys sitting on her nightstand. "I'd like to be divorced before we do that," I said. Holly just grinned. "Okay, 4 weeks from today it is. We'll see a justice of the peace in the morning, and in the afternoon, I'll move in with you until we find a larger place. Don't you want a big wedding?" I asked as I finished putting my clothing on and was fighting with my shoes. "No," Holly said with a shrug. "The wedding should be just for you and me. However, we can plan for a big renewal of vows at our first anniversary, complete with a reception. That would be nice." I frowned. "I just don't." "Don't what?" Holly interrupted. "Don't want me to miss having a big wedding. Weddings are for mothers. And if mine tries to come near the wedding or our reception, I hope she can run faster than a shotgun blast. She may not have put the noose around my father's neck, but she murdered him all the same." I was shocked by her passion as she stood up and walked over to me. "Ryan Bennett, I'm not marrying you for a reception. I'm marrying you because you are a wonderful, wonderful man. I don't need all the trimmings for a wedding. This wedding is a contract between you and me. You are promising to love and protect me, to father my children, and to be my lifelong best friend and companion. In exchange, I'm promising to love you, to raise our children, and to screw you into exhaustion every night. I could not help myself. What if I want a bit of afternoon delight with you? I said with a smirk. Holly stood there gaping for a moment and then punched me in the chest. Oh, just for that I should drop to your knees and give me a BJ? I said, continuing to smirk. I should have realized that I was treading dangerously because Holly immediately dropped to her knees and started to grab at my belt. I like that idea, she said as I started to fight with her hands. No, I finally snapped. I don't think that is a good idea today. I dashed down the hall, hopping on one foot as I had only managed to get a single shoe on before stumbling and sitting on the couch. Holly came out smiling and laughing, now wearing only the garter belt and stockings from the night before. Ryan, I know you are frightened, but I will do anything for you, she said as she gave me a hug. Now go home and start thinking of what we need to put in storage. I doubt your place can fit both your stuff and mine. I had finally put my recalcitrant shoe on and, after giving Holly a quick kiss on the cheek, dashed out to my car, her loving laughter giving my feet wings. I drove home half in shock. A week ago, I had been a burnt-out refugee hiding from an abandoned wife and a broken marriage. Now I was in the middle of a divorce and had just asked a gorgeous blonde to marry me. I had no clue what the future would be, but my heart was singing. The singing did hit a few discordant notes once I arrived home to shower and start cleaning up. It was just past lunch when the phone rang. I answered and found Janelle on the other end of the line. Ryan, Janelle almost purred. You'll be glad to know that I have everything either sold or packed for a move. And thanks to an apartment broker, I found a place near yours that I can move into for a while. We'll get a chance to see each other soon. How about next Saturday you show me about town? Janelle, I said, trying to stall while my brain engaged. I never thought you'd move so quickly. Why, Ryan? What's left for me in Maple Grove? My story ended up in the papers and few companies are going to hire me. Besides, you aren't here, she purred. But Janelle, I replied, it's been 15 months. I've been trying to move on and let the wounds of the past heal. Have you been on any dates? Janelle asked. I thought about my 2 times with Holly. Somehow my mind decided that neither time qualified as an actual date and replied, not as such. But there are a couple women at work who are interested. I've kind of been holding off because despite it all, I was married to you, even if only on paper. Janelle laughed. Ryan, I know you, and it's probably a lot more serious, but you still are my best friend, and I do need to get out of Maple Grove. Who knows, perhaps this will give me the closure I need. You vanishing the way you did denied me that. Even Lynn admitted that. I sighed, but eventually agreed that next Saturday I would meet Janelle at 11 at my apartment and take her around the town, showing her the sights. Unfortunately, by the time we hung up, the conversation had put a definite damper on my good mood. I finally had to head out to a jewelry store to purchase a special ring to help bring back my feelings of hope and happiness. Monday came and I arrived early at work and left a jewelry box in the middle of Holly's chair. I wanted her to find it and wondered how she would react. I knew it would be a few hours before she arrived, so I headed to my office to make some very special phone calls. Lawrence was a bit peeved when I asked for 2 weeks off, but then became honestly happy for me when I explained the reasons why. He enthusiastically granted me a total of 2.5 weeks, saying that I would want some time at home to enjoy being with my new bride. He then made me promise to wait by the phone, as another important call would be coming in. I was reviewing some weekend reports on the marketing of the new products when the phone called. Ryan Bennett, I answered. Ryan, you old dog. How are things going for you? Thundered the voice of Vigo, our CEO and an old friend. I don't know, I replied honestly. Can I tell you in about 6 weeks? Vigo laughed. Don't make me hammer the news out of you. What's this rumor about you needing time off for a honeymoon? I thought you hadn't divorced Janelle yet. She found me last week, and we agreed to divorce. There is some kind of fast-track divorce, so it will be final in less than 4 more weeks, I replied. Vigo started laughing. Well, that must mean you don't plan for any period of mourning. You want to start your honeymoon the next Monday. Who is the lucky lady who captured your heart? I hemmed for a moment. Well, she works in accounting. Holly, Vigo gave a snort. Holly Simmons? The blonde who looks like she belongs on a football field in a cheerleader outfit? She was one throughout high school and college, I said, surprising myself. Vigo started laughing even harder. You don't aim low, do you? How did you get her? Last I heard, she was refusing any dates. I was shaking my head. You always did keep your ear to company gossip. Of course, Vigo said completely without remorse. It's the best way to be sure all my loyal minions are pulling in the same direction. But answer the question. I sighed. She went after me, and Saturday night, I surrendered. Wave the white flag, did you? Put up a good fight, I hope. Vigo laughed. Well, That works with my plans. What plans? Ones you'll like. You know how Lawrence loves the development and rollout of products, but he seems to struggle with the marketing, Vigo said, changing the subject. Yes, he's a great manager, but I get a feeling that marketing just doesn't excite him, I admitted. Good, because we're going to promote him to Senior VP of Product Development and promote you to the VP of Marketing. What? Not listening? Or just shocked? Come now, Ryan. I told you when you took the transfer that it was a final stop before you made executive grade. Yes, but nothing. You are the best I have at managing the monsters who I have developing marketing plans, and you know the customers. We need your insight in the boardroom. Besides, it means I can put Holly in your section. What? Vigo was now laughing. You'll need a dedicated accountant to handle all the ins and outs of the advertising contracts and the salesperson expense accounts. We could even give you a joint office. Boss? I wailed. What? You saying you don't like the idea? But sexual harassment? Company morale? I protested. Like your wife would complain. Besides, your underlings already love you and want to see you happy. Company gossip, Vigo chuckled. Now, for you not much will change, but we'll move you into a bigger office when you get back. Lawrence will fly down in a week or so to go over the meeting duties, but otherwise you just keep coming up with new marketing plans. Your recovery on the last one was genius. Vigo hung up, leaving me staring at a dead phone. I knew he liked me, as I had served several months as his assistant early in my time at the company, but never expected this. I found myself wondering what other surprises might lay in store. I did get one more visitor later. Holly must have arrived at work around 9 because at just 5 after the hour I found my arms filled by a crying blonde lady thanking me for the diamond and sapphire ring that now graced her finger. She showed it to Sally, my secretary, a moment later, and the woman surprised me by congratulating me and giving me a hug before sitting at her computer and typing furiously. I suspected that the whole company would hear about my new status before lunch. I was wrong. The gossip mill was more efficient than I imagined, and by 11, every one of my underlings had stopped by to congratulate me. Michael even presented me with a small tin of cash. We had a pool that went to the first person who got a date with her, he told me. Never thought we'd find out this way, though. I tried to hand it back to him, protesting that Holly and I were yet to actually date, but Michael would hear nothing of it, and I found myself holding over $600, which I decided to add to the honeymoon fund. I wanted more time with Holly, but Vigo's announcement to me was the leading wave in a massive transformation in the company hierarchy, and everyone soon found themselves swamped with work. Holly did start bringing lunches to work after that first Monday, and we would find time to sit in my office, eating and talking about our childhoods. I expected more flirting, but Holly only offered gentle hugs and kisses until Friday when I asked her why she was so much less forward. Silly, she responded. I caught my man, and I know that in 3 weeks we'll be joining forever. I want that night to be special. So I'm going to wait. But earlier you were throwing yourself at me? I said, feeling confused. Holly laughed. And I wouldn't have said no, but I love you for making me wait. It will make that first night mean so much more. I love you, Ryan. Every day I love you more and more. I sighed, especially as Holly just looked on me with love and trust as I explained Janelle's plan to move and have me show her around on Saturday. Her only response was a promise to call afterwards. But Holly and Janelle were destined to meet that night. With the news of our engagement spreading throughout the company, the usual Charlie's crowd dashed into my office at 5 and dragged me off to my car, insisting that I had to drink at least one round at the bar. We ended up gathered around our usual raucous table with Holly leaning on my shoulder when Janelle walked in the door. Wow, that is one fine lady, Michael said as he noticed her walking towards us. It's just Janelle, I said unconsciously before realizing who it was. Holly tried to pull away, but my hand grasped hers and held it against my lap as Janelle reached the table. Ryan, I hoped I might find you here, she said. I'm all moved in, and I've even got a couple of job interviews. I nodded. I'm guessing that you found out about this place from your investigator. Janelle laughed. He warned me that you'd noticed him. Yes, he said you went here with some coworkers on Fridays occasionally. Are these them? She asked, looking around the half-empty table. I smiled. Well, I think Diane is out on the dance floor. As for Ethan and Helen, well, I coughed. So right now the table is me, Michael, who works as a salesman, and Holly, one of the senior accountants. Janelle's eyes narrowed as she saw Holly's leaning against me. Is she just an accountant? She hissed. I sighed and held Holly's left hand down when she tried to lift it to reveal the ring. Janelle, we agreed to divorce, and I know you want another chance, but it was already too late for that. If you hadn't found me, I was going to return to Maple Grove to see about filing there. Holly is my fiancée. I could hear the gasps from both Holly and Janelle. Janelle had tears in her eyes, but it was Holly who whispered in my ear, "I love you." "Thank you." Janelle sat down and I signaled the barmaid to bring a beer. "Why? I tried so hard to find you. It was just a tiny mistake. Anyone could have made it." I sighed, but it was Michael who spoke up. "No, I am learning that cheating is never just a tiny mistake. It's an insidious and completely evil way to ruin a marriage." Janelle looked at him, but Michael merely nodded at me. "It's kind of quiet right now, but Dean found out about Helen's parking lot trips. He filed for divorce on Tuesday, even though Helen begged him and told him that she had stopped." "My God," I replied. "How?" Michael looked uncomfortable. "They went to the baseball game, and one of the men she used to regularly go out to the parking lot with ran into her and propositioned her. I understand that once Dean understood what was happening, he stormed off and left Helen stranded at the ballpark." Janelle seemed to shrink in on herself, but I shook my head. "Let me guess. Right now Helen figures she's getting back at Dean by taking Ethan out to the parking lot." Michael nodded. "That's about it." I could see Janelle looking upset, but she nodded. "At least you're honest. But you always were, Ryan. I just hope Holly knows what a wonderful man you are and never betrays you." Holly smiled and reached her right hand out to Janelle. "I'm going to try to make Ryan the happiest man in the city. He's already made me the happiest woman." I coughed. Holly just looked at me and smiled while Janelle shook her head. I could see Janelle thinking, but before I could think of something to say, she spoke. "Perhaps tomorrow is a bad idea then. I hope to use it as a way to get back with you, Ryan." I sighed and shrugged, but Holly jumped in. "I've got an idea." "Janelle, part of the idea was to look around as well as reconnect with Ryan. Well, Michael here is a bachelor and he was admiring your beauty, so why don't we make it a double first date? We can go to the blues festival in the afternoon and then share a dinner out at Del Marcos." "First date?" Janelle said. "But Ryan said that you—" Holly smiled and held up her left hand, showing the ring. "We are engaged, but we've never been on a real date. I wore him down last week after our night here, and he broke down and proposed." Janelle glared at me. "But you promised." I sighed. "Janelle, I promised nothing. I said we had to get divorced, and we have filed. You said you would be moving out here in an attempt to get back with me, and I said nothing. I had not made any decisions then, although I have to admit that Holly's flirting had me considering filing for divorce solo. All I knew is that the image of you with Steve seemed burned into my brain, and I needed to get past that. If things were different, if Holly wasn't here, perhaps we'd have a chance, but I'm sorry." I looked down in defeat. I realized that while I could never trust Janelle the way I did when we were married, I did care for her deeply, and this had to hurt her a lot. Michael seemed to realize what had just been proposed. "Hey, do I get a say in this?" he asked. "No." Both Janelle and Holly replied in unison. They looked at each other and burst into giggles before Janelle finally waved. "I guess I can't complain." I knew that it was a long shot, and Holly, "I like your idea." She turned to Michael. "Okay, you know the basics, but I'll introduce myself. I'm Janelle Jones, soon-to-be divorced ex-wife of this businessman here. I love dancing, soft music, and NASCAR. Right now, I've taken a vow of celibacy until my divorce is final, but after that I'm willing to do anything for the right man. Think you can tolerate 3 weeks of dating and flirting to see if we might be compatible?" Holly giggled as I whistled. "Nice and direct, Janelle. Just like I remember you." She laughed, obviously remembering our first date in college where she walked up to me and told me we were going back to my dorm room to test our sexual compatibility. That one night turned into 2 years as lovers and our 7-year marriage. Michael looked over at me as if to say, "Do I accept?" I laughed and gave him the faintest of nods. He finally blushed and turned back to Janelle. "I guess I accept." Janelle gave a squeal of delight and ran around the table to drop into Michael's lap and give him a kiss. Just then a slow dance started, and moments later Michael and I were each dancing with our dates for Saturday cheek to cheek. There are times you expect a date or meeting to be awkward, and it turns out just fine. Saturday proved to be exactly that for us. Holly and Michael showed up at my place moments after Janelle did, and after a short discussion we piled into my sedan for the drive to the blues festival. This was an open-air, multi-stage event, and after agreeing to meet up at the car at 4 should we get separated, we began wandering the area, listening to the bands and looking over the craft booths. The most surprising thing was how quickly Janelle and Holly became the best of friends, teasing both Michael and I, and ambushing us should we turn our backs. Janelle and I also fell back into the great casual friendship that had been the backbone of our marriage. It was funny. I think it was at that moment we both realized that the marriage might be over, but the friendship was going to endure. The only one who might have felt left out was Michael, but I caught him and Janelle holding hands while we listened to one band in mid-afternoon, And after that, she acted like a starstruck schoolgirl around him for the rest of the day. He was obviously impressed too, as I found when the ladies snuck away to powder their noses. Wow, he enthused to me. She's wonderful, smart, and beautiful. I can't imagine finding another woman like her. Would you take it bad if I did marry her someday? I smiled. Michael, I do care for her a lot. Love her, and don't hurt her, that is all I can ask. But do watch her just a little. I think she's learned her lesson, but… Michael nodded and smiled, shaking my hand just as the ladies returned. What were you talking about? Holly asked me. I could see the discomfort in Michael's face and smiled. Nothing, I replied. Just mentioning how much I love the short skirt you were wearing. Holly laughed and spun, causing the skirt to flare up and reveal her stocking tops. It's perfect for keeping your attention, she vamped. I was caught blushing as Janelle and Michael laughed. The giggles and laughter would continue until we finally decided it was time to head to the restaurant. I cannot say too much about dinner. The food was heavenly, and the company pleasant. I just remember very little of the conversation. Holly and I spent most of the dinner gazing into each other's eyes, and I noticed that Janelle and Michael did the same. I am sure that the waiter we had was dying from sugar shock from the number of sappy feelings floating around the table, and yet, I would not trade that night for anything. It firmly established my friendship with Janelle for the future, and it was the starting point for her marriage to Michael. We drove back to my apartment, but Janelle and Michael both begged off the nightcap. They exchanged phone numbers and a kiss that should have melted the sidewalk before disappearing into the night, each heading to their own car. Holly came up with me to look at the apartment. Okay, it was also to spend the night. I should not deny that, although this time Holly had brought along a long t-shirt to wear to bed. I just wish she had not very slowly and erotically removed her clothes just before climbing into bed and snuggling up to me. I am only a man, and our decision to wait the 3 more weeks nearly ended that night, although from the look in Holly's eyes, that might have been what she had in mind. The next Monday produced another surprise. I arrived at work to find an envelope on my desk. Inside I found tickets for Holly and me to fly to the Bahamas and spend 2 weeks in luxury at one of the 5-star resorts there. The flight out was the evening of our planned wedding, and the envelope contained a sign note from Vigo that read, "Have fun." I waited until Holly was able to come into the office later in the day. Then I handed her the envelope as I called up Vigo on the speakerphone. I am pretty sure that the call was absolutely unnecessary. The scream of joy from Holly when she realized what she was holding nearly deafened me and had to have been heard by everyone in the building. Vigo merely laughed and said it was a small gift to his favorite vice president. It was another week of hell at work. Vigo and Lawrence had announced a host of changes to build up to the major changes to the corporate structure. I found myself hauled into meeting after meeting to review the qualifications and duties of various managers. Many did not directly report to me, but I soon found that my promotion was expected to absorb some new departments, and the managers were currently assigned to the departments I was going to be overseeing in the future. It was a hectic and tiring week, and only Holly's gentle kisses every night when we met in the elevator kept me going. In the end, the week was so tiring that Holly and I both decided to skip the Friday night gathering at Charlie's. Instead, Holly came over to my apartment and climbed into bed wearing only the skimpiest of thong panties. I warned her that she was definitely tempting fate and the honor of wearing white for her wedding. But Holly merely laughed and kissed me, saying that in her heart we were already married. Saturday was the company picnic and a day of several surprises. Holly and I were now a recognized couple at work, but Janelle showed up on Michael's arm sporting her own engagement ring. She excitedly told Holly and I that she and Michael had discovered a mutual love of dance and music and spent all day on Sunday just wandering around learning more about each other. They were planning a bit longer engagement than Holly and I were planning, because Michael wanted to have his family there, but did insist that I would be Michael's best man while Holly stood as Janelle's maid of honor to thank us for helping bring them together. Holly giggled and said, "You are going to be so ready for our honeymoon." Somehow, I did fall asleep that night, with Holly's beautiful body in my arms and her lavender-scented hair under my cheek. Holly rewarded me in the morning with a kiss that drained all the energy from my legs before dashing off to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. Throughout the next week, I believe the ladies in the company conspired against me. Holly was suddenly busy with all kinds of meetings and audits, and when she was free I found myself dragged into one-on-one sessions with various marketing managers and sales representatives. The only times I got to see her were brief waves that I received each morning as she passed by my office on the way to her first morning meeting. I tried to call her apartment after work only to receive no answer. She left loving messages on my voicemail every day, but we never managed to meet in person. Finally, Friday rolled around and I hoped to get a chance to see her, But Michael and Ethan walked in at quitting time and dragged me from my desk, saying that a condemned man needed one last night of freedom. Condemned? I blurted. If I'm condemned, then it's to happiness in Holly's arms. Ethan gave a bitter laugh. It's our job to remind our brother of all the wonders he's going to miss once he is married. The gathering of male coworkers and friends gave a half-hearted cheer, and then we zipped off to a local steakhouse to begin the party. Once we arrived, the gathered men refused to allow me to pay for anything or even get out of my seat. Michael was on my right and Dean was situated on my left. I was a bit surprised to see Dean there, but during a moment when Ethan was distracted, he whispered to me, "Helen is with Janelle and Holly, and Janelle promised to watch her. I'm here to protect you." Michael heard that Ethan is very unhappy that Holly is marrying you and suspects he might try something. I'd be careful about drinking. I laughed. Ethan must not remember that I rarely drink more than one beer in an evening. It's going to be hard for him to pull much with him sitting so far away either. Dean just nodded as Michael stood up and hit his glass with a fork to get everyone's attention. "Gentlemen, boys, and victims of the matriarchy, if I might have a moment of your time. Today, we celebrate the last day that our brother Ryan Bennett will be a free man. So, commiserate with him. Remind him of the glorious status of bachelorhood and wish him well, for tomorrow he will be sacrificed upon the altar of matrimony." There was a general cheer, and I decided to stand up for a moment. "Thank you, Michael, and thank you, gathered men. Yes, I am being torn from the brotherhood and sacrificed to the bonds of matrimony, but please do not mourn for me. Instead, celebrate the happiness I have had and the respect and trust one have for all of you." Another cheer rang out as the waiters arrived with the steak dinner. As they passed out the food, Ethan found an excuse to walk around the table, and I watched a white powder drop from his fingers into my half-drunk beer. I pushed it over by Dean, who nodded as Ethan stopped to whisper to one of the waiters before disappearing out of the private room. Michael tapped my arm. "I hope you aren't offended by this." I laughed. "Just protect me from Ethan and his plans, and get me to the church on time," I responded. "Preferably unmolested." Michael laughed and reached into the pocket of his business jacket. "This might help," he said as he handed me a picture of Holly in her cheerleader outfit at a football game. As I looked at it and then passed it back to him, he shrugged. "I have a few. Holly said that it would help keep your mind on her tonight." I laughed and turned back to the steak dinner in front of me. My beer sat untouched for the remainder of dinner, although I did ask for some water later once. I discovered that someone had asked for heavy Cajun spices be put on my steak. It was heavenly, but very hot, and without Dean's warning, I would definitely have taken in whatever substance Ethan had used to lace my beer. After about 90 minutes of dining and tail spinning, Ethan orchestrated the group to pile back into the cars and drive to the local Marriott, where we found one of the smaller banquet halls waiting for us. At first it was more drinking, but soon Michael got everyone's attention again. "Now, you all know we can't let a brother enter the world of matrimony without some protection. So tonight, we have a few prizes and tokens of our esteem to give him." The cheer rang out again, and I was rushed over to a chair. As soon as I sat down, a table was brought out. It had several boxes resting on it, and Michael stood next to me as it arrived. Swapping the beer, Ethan handed me with one that had been resting on the floor under the chair unopened. "Holly would never forgive me," he whispered. I laughed and looked over the boxes. Michael just stood there quietly until I picked up a box and opened it. It was a long, thin box, and I had no idea what might be in it until I turned the open side to the floor and a riding crop fell out. The men roared. "Just a little something to help show the matriarchy that the man gets to do the riding," Michael said. I shook my head but opened the next box, which appeared to be a standard clothing box. However, instead of a shirt, I found a suede-covered paddle with the words "the boss" embroidered on it. "Something to use on the missus when she gets uppity and forgets who is that boss," Dean said as the gathered men laughed again. I was shaking my head and chuckling myself as I picked up a third box. This one was considerably smaller than the other two, about the size of an empty paper towel tube. I opened it and slid out a nameplate. "Ryan Bennett, VP of Marketing." There was a moment of silence, and then the gathered men began to applaud. I smiled and held it up before opening the next box. This was another clothing-sized one. However, instead of clothing, I found a roll of duct tape. The other men seemed as confused as I was until Michael shouted, "We all know that it has thousands of uses, and I'm sure he'll find himself using it often." I got a devilish impulse and quickly tore off a piece. Before Michael realized what was going on, I had laid it over his mouth, silencing him for a moment. "And if I can't think of any other ideas, it makes a great conversation stopper," I said as the men roared with laughter. Michael pulled the tape free and was laughing as hard as the others as I came to the last box. He bent down and whispered to me, "Take care with this one. It's really special." With that in mind, I slowly opened this final box. Inside, I found a lace and silk creation in a baby blue that perfectly matched Holly's eyes. I held it up and realized that it was one of the skimpiest and sexiest negligées I had ever seen. There was an intake of air from the gathered men when they realized what I held. I was about to turn to Michael when he whispered in my ear, "It's Holly's size. Janelle got her size, and we ordered that just for your wedding night. We thought you would appreciate something to keep in the future to remember the day your lives joined forever." I was touched and felt a few tears in my eyes as I pictured lying in bed as Holly climbed into my arms wearing this exquisite creation. I gave Dean and Michael firm and honest handshakes as I collected my trophies and turned to the others. The mood was quiet and reflective for just a moment, and then Ethan turned the place upside down by opening the door to the hall and admitting 3 women wearing racy versions of nurses' uniforms. "Hey, how about we show Ryan what he's going to miss?" he shouted as some bad techno music started up from a boombox. I have to admit that the girls were not bad looking, and had I met them on the street before Holly won my heart, I might have considered asking them out. However, as they gyrated to the music and started to remove clothing, I felt only sadness that Ethan would try something so sleazy. And it did feel sleazy. The girls were clearly being much less inhibited than you might find in a strip club, and the touching became rather blatant. One of the girls came over and tried to put a hand against my crotch, but I brushed it away as Michael dropped a picture of Holly on my lap. Dean had vanished, but Michael pulled up a chair and sat next to me as the trio of ladies writhed and caressed around the room, removing clothing and doing their best to get every man in the room attentive. Michael looked over at Ethan, who was staring at us, open hatred in his eyes. "So that's his plan," Michael hissed in my ears. "He expected you to be out of it on whatever drug he used, and then he'd get pictures of you with one or more of the hookers he just brought in." I shrugged as one of the ladies came over and started to rub against me. "I heard you are the lucky man," she whispered in my ear. I held up the picture that was sitting in my lap and showed it to the woman. "I'm sorry. You are pretty, but losing this is just too high a price," I said as I pushed her hand away from my belt buckle. The woman seemed confused for a moment and looked back towards the rest of the men where an orgy had now broken out. Her 2 friends were on their knees, each pleasing a man as another screwed her from behind. The sight was slightly sickening as there was no tenderness or even closeness, just a bunch of adults rutting. She looked back at me. She'd never know. I shook my head. I'd know, and I'd never forgive myself. Besides, the man who invited you appears to be holding a camera. I get a feeling any incriminating pictures would end up in her hands rather quickly. The woman looked back over at Ethan, who realized what was going on, and belatedly hid the digital camera behind his back. I could almost feel the anger in her when she saw it. "That worm. You'd think he'd be happy for you. That you found such a beautiful woman," she growled. Michael leaned over me and whispered to her. She turned him down several times. Said she wanted a man she could trust. The woman shook her head and laughed as I sat looking at the picture I had of Holly. "You really love her," she whispered. I nodded. "It has only been a month, and already she means everything to me. I love her so much." Michael just laughed. "Okay, that's my cue. Time to get this lover boy to bed so he's ready for the wedding tomorrow." He stood up and helped me to my feet as the woman dashed off to grab her nurse robe and throw it on. As Michael helped me stand, this woman gathered up the accumulated gifts and said to us, "I'll help you to the room. What about your friends?" I asked as the orgy continued on, most of the men now ignoring anything other than the 2 women. The woman shrugged. "We aren't really friends. I know them from the escort service that Ethan used, but I don't know them well. I only agreed to do this because I need the money. Those 2 love the sex." The woman walked with us as we left the room and headed to the elevator. Once inside, she smiled at us. "I should introduce myself. I'm Maureen." Michael smiled. "I'm Michael. The groom-to-be here is Ryan. Nice to meet you." Maureen smiled. "I'm just glad you didn't get nasty and believe I was part of that disaster." "Why would I?" I asked. It appeared to be just a plan of Ethan's. "Besides, you seem to be a nice lady." Maureen laughed. "Not really. I sank pretty low after one too many abusive boyfriends. Now I strip and escort to try to pay all the bills I have, but it hasn't improved my low opinion of men. Honestly, you 2 are the only men that I've wanted to talk to in ages." Michael and I laughed as the elevator opened and Michael led me out onto a floor. We walked down 3 doors, and then Michael used a keycard to open the door. He held it open for me to enter and handed me the key, but looked back at Maureen. "I don't know how to say this, but we are trying to keep him pure for the wedding. Letting you into the room might look wrong." Maureen laughed. "I understand. And now you have me wanting to attend this wedding. I need to meet the woman who won Ryan's heart. She's one lucky lady." Michael looked at me, and at my nod reached into a pocket and pulled out another keycard. I hope Janelle doesn't get upset with me over this, he muttered. Maureen, this is for room 710 just down the hall. Stay there for the night, and we can give you a ride to the wedding tomorrow. Maureen laughed. Baby, let me get home and put on some real clothing first. I doubt anyone wants me there in a nurse robe and no panties. I could see Michael blush and sputter as Maureen took the key. She smiled. I'll run home and get some formal clothing. You two do interest me. Michael laughed. Interest is fine, but I have a lovely woman waiting for me, so I can only be a friend. Maureen looked at both of us with her jaw agape. Two honorable men. I never thought I'd find one. Now I know I have to attend. She turned and walked away as Michael stepped inside with me. I had not looked, but found that the room was spartanly decorated with two single beds. Michael saw me walk over to one and shrugged. The plan wasn't to have both of us in here, but we allowed for that. I just have to call Janelle and let her know. He stepped into the bathroom, and I could hear him talking on the phone as I lay down in the bed to sleep. I woke the next morning remembering the wisps of a very erotic dream where I held Holly in my arms. Michael was already up and about and putting the finishing touches on his tuxedo. He had laid my own tuxedo out on the bed and happily teased me as I got ready for the wedding. Room service had been ordered for breakfast, so once we left the room we would be going directly to the wedding. The one thing I should have caught was that when I asked where the wedding was, Michael simply smiled. Finally, I was ready for the wedding, and we walked to the elevator. Maureen and Helen met us there. Helen was saying that Janelle sent her to make sure that Maureen arrived safely. We took the elevator to the ground floor, and I found a limo was waiting right outside. Michael made it clear that the limo was there to take us to the wedding location. I expected the driver to take us to the courthouse, but the limo turned onto the freeway and traveled several miles before exiting and following the road to the local state park. There the limo parked in front of beautifully decorated canopy, and Michael smiled as the door was opened. Vigo changed your wedding plans too, Helen said with a shrug. We walked up and I found all of my friends and many of my coworkers waiting quietly. Vigo had a huge smile and gave me a hug as I looked over the crowd. I couldn't let my favorite VP get married in a little courthouse, he said over my protests. Michael hurried me over to stand in front of the minister, and the strains of "Here Comes the Bride" rang out over the crowd. I tried to turn around and look, but Michael prevented me from turning to look. Trust me, the wait will be worth it, he whispered. I looked ahead, listening to the music and wondering just how much expense Vigo had gone through in order to put on this wedding. I waited patiently when I noticed movement to my right out of the corner of my eye and turned my head. To my everlasting thanks, there are two perfect pictures of the moment I saw Holly in the wedding dress. The first was taken from over her right shoulder and catches the awe and love I felt at that moment when I looked upon the beautiful woman who I love. The other was taken from where an altar would normally stand in a church and barely captures her beauty. Holly was wearing a sheath of white that clung to her every curve and yet flowed like water as you looked down her body. It was sleeveless, but ribbons of lace wrapped around her arms, leading my gaze down to her hands, which carried a bouquet of red roses. Her hair had been redone in an intricate braided pattern with white feathers and blue beads placed to enhance her beauty. A veil did not mar the effect, and the understated makeup allowed her love and passion shine in the morning light. I think I gasped, but I do know that Michael had to elbow me 3 times before I turned back to the minister to listen to him begin the vows. The rest of the wedding passed in a blur. I remember clearly stating I do when prompted, and Holly's clear with all my heart. I do when the minister asked her if she took my hand. I thought my heart would overfill with joy when I heard those wonderful words. I now pronounce you man and wife. You may kiss the bride, and Holly threw her arms around me to kiss me. We walked out to the applause of all my friends and retreated to the limo. Vigo was standing there, smiling. The limo will get you to the airport, and you've got all you need for the honeymoon. Come home safe. He gave both Holly and I manly hugs before watching us get into the limo and waving as we rode away. Words seem completely inadequate to describe our wedding night or the 2 weeks following. That first night, Holly found the negligee I had been given during the bachelor party and put it on just before getting into bed with me. I described it as a creation of lace and silk, but not even my most erotic dreams matched the beauty of seeing Holly in that blue negligee as she crawled up the bed and settled into my arms that night. She was trembling both in anticipation and fear, but she needed to screw more than I did. That night I discovered just how little my dreams of the past 4 weeks matched the reality of making love to Holly. She was wanton in her needs and gave freely of her love, caresses, and body. The honeymoon night actually became a honeymoon weekend, and it was Tuesday morning before we finally had a desire to explore outside the suite in the resort we were in. We discovered that Vigo had prearranged a multitude of possible activities and wound up sailing, swimming, climbing, and riding over every part of the island while enjoying the wonderful feeling of being married. By the time we were packing up to return home, Holly was fully my soulmate and my life. We returned home to find that Michael and Janelle had arranged to pack up our apartments and move everything to our new home. We had a bit of unpacking to do, but our first night back was also our first night in our new home. We expected Michael and Janelle to stop by, but other than a cheerful note on the kitchen table, hoping we had a wonderful honeymoon, they were unavailable. Life settled in and Holly and I found both work and life at home a combination of endless joy. Michael and Janelle were planning a December wedding and surprised us by purchasing a house just down the street from ours. They were openly living in sin, but had also become our best friends, and it was a rare weekend that we did not get together at least one night, even if it was to enjoy the Friday night at the bar. There would be two more significant events before Michael and Janelle's marriage, which seemed to signal an end to this great transition in my life. The first occurred on the third Saturday in November. Holly had managed to score 2 tickets to return to her alma mater for their year-ending rivalry game, and dragged me along. We arrived early to wander the campus and visit the old apartment complex where she stayed her senior year before heading up to the stadium. The game itself was not the best, as Holly's team sprang out to an early lead and started to coast towards victory, but right after halftime Holly insisted that we had to walk down near the field. Once there, she waved to one of the cheerleaders who ran over with a joyful cry. "Holly," she shouted. "How are you doing, girl?" "Wonderful, Megan," Holly said. "I just wanted to stop by and say hello. Sorry I've kind of been so quiet the last year." Megan laughed. "Hey, you graduated and are in the business world now, but I see you haven't forgotten to exercise. I think you'd still fit the uniform and be able to tumble with the rest of us." Holly joined in the laughter. "Well, my uniform isn't going to fit very well in a few months." She held out her left hand and Megan paused for a moment. "Does that mean, girl, are you saying?" Megan babbled. I could see Holly nodding and suddenly realized that there was a slight glow about her. "Yes," she shouted to Megan. "I'm now married and pregnant." I grabbed Holly and spun her to look her in the eyes. I could see the truth in them and gave her a passionate kiss. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "I only confirmed it yesterday and wanted to surprise you," she said as Megan jumped into the stands to hug Holly. "Wow," Megan said. "Talk about a complete surprise. I'm guessing that this is the father and husband." Holly smiled. "Yes, this is Ryan Bennett, my husband." "How long?" Megan asked. Holly laughed. 2 months for both. The doctor thinks I got pregnant on my wedding night." I was hugging Holly to my chest, unable to speak as I listened to Holly speak so lovingly and fondly about her marriage to me. The conversation lasted another 10 minutes before Megan got shouted at to jump back on the field and get back to cheerleading, but I do not remember another word. The fact that I was going to be a father had me in complete shock. The other event was less pleasant. About 3 weeks after Holly's announcement, we were back at Charlie's with the usual gang as well as Maureen, who now showed up when possible. She had become quite a friend to Michael, Janelle, Helen, Holly, and I, and often liked to tease Michael and I about our devotion to our partners. Helen had become rather depressed, saying that Dean was becoming more and more distant. But that night Helen was fighting the flu, and finally Holly and Maureen decided to drive her home 2 hours before our usual breakup time. Michael, Janelle, and I drove back to my place about a half hour later, only to find Holly and Maureen comforting a devastated Helen in my living room. It turned out that as they walked in, they discovered Dean in the living room with one of the 2 strippers from my bachelor party bent over the couch as he screwed her. Helen had collapsed in the hallway upon seeing this. After all of Dean's demands that she be faithful, he had betrayed her in the worst way, and Holly and Maureen carried her back to the car and brought her to my place. The next day, Michael and I escorted her to the house where she collected her clothing and personal belongings before turning and leaving forever. She stayed with Holly and I for a week and then moved in with Maureen. Well, it's been 30 years since that crazy year. Holly and I are retired now, but still living in the same house. Michael and Janelle live just down the street still, and it's still a rare weekend that we do not meet for some activity or dinner. Usually, Helen and Maureen, who purchased a house just across the street and still live together, join us. Our 3 children have all graduated from college and are off in the world. Victor, our son, who was named after Holly's father, studied physics and is now working with NASA on some project involving solar bodies. He is happily married and loves to bring his 2 sons by once a month. Chloe and Lila are twins and every bit as blonde and beautiful as their mother, and just as smart. Both studied engineering and have moved on to work on major projects in the private sector. Wedding bells have not rung yet, but both girls have serious suitors. They say they want a man as good as I am, and Holly just laughs, saying that they might be looking a long time. I chide her for putting me on too high a pedestal, but whenever I do, she just takes me to the bedroom and proceeds to try to kill me with love and affection. Perhaps someday I will need the little blue pill, but for now a kiss from Holly and the look from her baby blue eyes still gets the old soldier to stand at attention. I have lived a wonderful and special life. I thought Janelle had destroyed me with 5 words. It's not what you think. Back then I hated her for what she did. But just last week Holly and I caught Michael and her in an embrace out on our back patio over a barbecue. Once again she said, "It's not what you think." I just smiled, thinking of how those words long ago led me into Holly's arms and gave Janelle a gentle hug and whispered, "You don't know what I think." Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.